Hello and welcome, everybody.
Hello.
To Killing Our National Treasure, the sad truth the world needs to know. A Vegan FTA interactive live panel focusing on the largest commercial wildlife slaughter anywhere in the world. October 24th is World Kangaroo Day, where we celebrate and recognise the importance of Australia's national treasure, the kangaroo. However, this event is also a time to shine a spotlight on the industry that is wiping out these unique animals and literally killing Australia. Today, you can learn how each and every one of us can play a part in ending these deaths and save the national treasure. So join myself, Jackie, and our incredible guests today.
They certainly are incredible. For starters, we're honoured to have two multi-award-winning filmmakers on our panel today. Hello to our panel. We have got McIntyre Clere here, joining us from Washington today. She has been a film director for over 20 years, and in doing so brings together key international social and environmental issues with beautiful cinematic storytelling. She's joined today by her cinematographer husband, Mick McIntyre, who has spent more than 30 years working in the film industry. Together, they have founded Second Nature Films, and through their amazing and impactful work are able to bring important issues to the fore in the form of unforgettable, and I mean unforgettable, films such as What to Do About Whales and Kangaroo, a love-hate story, which we'll be talking about today. You may have also seen Kate and Mick recently on our panel being the creators for the fantastic Eating Plants TV series, which showcases the joy and variety of being vegan wherever you are in the world. And talking of elsewhere in the world, we have got Greg Keightley today joining us from Australia.
Yes, Greg Keightley is a licensed kangaroo and wildlife carer with more than 20 years experience. He is one of the amazing volunteers who responds to wildlife crisis in New South Wales and is the co-founder of Kangaroos Alive Sanctuary with his partner Diane. Those who have seen the kangaroo documentary will know Greg and Diane as the whistleblowers desperately trying to expose and put to an end the nightly killing of kangaroos on the peaceful property. They do such fantastic work. So together, Mick, Kate, Greg and Diane have formed Kangaroos Alive, a global movement for the ethical treatment of kangaroos. And we cannot thank you enough. Thank you for joining us as well today.
Yes, welcome all of you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
We're really stoked to have you here with us and help to raise awareness of your mission. Kate and Mick, you started Kangaroos Alive with Greg and Diane after filming the Kangaroo documentary, that one that I said that everybody really needs to watch.
Link is coming up in the description, folks, so make sure you save and bookmark it for later watching.
Absolutely. Now, you spent 5 years researching these beautiful and unique animals in Australia. When did you first become aware of the plight of kangaroos, and what inspired you to make both this powerful film and start this global movement with World Kangaroo Day?
Yeah, look, thanks for having us. Yeah, look, it's an interesting story, the kangaroo, because it's the third most recognizable icon in the world. I think the research showed behind the Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower. So basically, everybody knows the kangaroo. Like it's such an icon, and not just for Australia, but for the world. And we always thought that was an interesting story, and we realized that no one had really told that story before. We'd had films about the natural history of the animal, and but no one had ever explored the iconic nature, the status, the special status this animal has in Australia and in the world. And so we took it on. I mean, we were aware of that it was also had controversial sort of issues in regards to farmers perceiving them as a problem. So we knew that there was interesting story. I mean, little did we know what we were about to unpack, and it turned out to be a much different film than I think we started out to make.
I can imagine. It is absolutely, I was gobsmacked. I had no idea. Here we are in New Zealand, Australia's neighbours, and I had no idea of the plight of the kangaroo. I did swear a lot. It's a beautiful movie, but I swore a lot at that film as well because it is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think every now and then as vegans, we come across a documentary and it just really just ignites a fire again. And kangaroo is definitely one of those stories. And so Australia clearly has a very mixed relationship with kangaroos. While they're heralded as the national icon and their image is proudly displayed on their rugby jerseys, airplanes, all over the place, the treatment of kangaroos greatly differs from what you might expect with that title of a national treasure. It would seem that the majority of Australians consider these beautiful creatures as nothing more than a resource or a pest. For many of our viewers today, this will be their first introduction to the multi-million-dollar kangaroo industry. In order to give us a good starting point on this issue, I think it's important that we address two of the key points, which is how kangaroos are regarded in Australian culture and the truth about their populations. So during Kangaroo, a love-hate story, we're showing clips of the Australian media and how they typically regard kangaroos. I was shocked when this came up. But to quote, plague-like proportions of kangaroos are affecting livestock and ruining native pasture lands. So when we decipher this, we see the use of language. There's clearly more worth placed on the livestock than there is the kangaroo. It far outweighs it in the way that they talk about it. And this is just one example of the picture painted in Australian culture surrounding kangaroos. So I'd love to hear from some of you about what are some of the other ideas that get thrown out there in society about kangaroos in order to justify their killing and cement them in people's minds as pests.
Yeah, I mean, it's really from colonial times, I think they really started to get that name, because when, of course, white people came to Australia and there was a sort of European bent on the way we looked at things, anything that wasn't in the benefit of the people colonizing the land felt like foreign and felt like invasive rather than themselves being invasive. So right from the start, kangaroos were seen as invasive. They didn't want to eat them like Indigenous people did, because they felt that was too sort of local and tribal. They wanted to eat mutton and the food that they had been used to in Europe. And sort of from then on, I think kangaroos were really seen as a pest that, as you said, competed with, land for livestock. So unfortunately, that sort of way of seeing things is really inbuilt into sort of a long dialogue in Australia. And it's amazing, like when we were making the film, how kind of that story keeps being reignited again and again across the landscape. And the media is just a classic example, like what you said, is they just constantly use this language that says that kangaroos are a pest, and they're always invading our space. These poor kangaroos, not only are they losing space because they're being shot for the industry, but they're losing space for the urban development, they're losing space for farming, they're losing space for fencing, there are fires and floods, and like the kangaroos are literally getting pushed into corners, and then the people in that corner are going, oh, we've got a plague of kangaroos in our corner. Like they've got nowhere to go. So it's just an interesting idea that we see the land so much as something for ourselves and for our own benefit and for our own wealth, basically. And anything that's against that wealth is wrong. And that's where the kangaroos sit in our sort of storytelling.
Absolutely. I mean, the Kangaroos Alive website, which Gareth will put a link to as well, is just full of information that I had no idea of in the history of kangaroos. I mean, let's face it, they were here long before we were, and this is how they get treated. And, the almighty animal ag as well. It's a great inconvenience that these kangaroos happen to, be hopping around this land that, is wanting to be used for farming animals that we have for food. And yeah, it's a fantastic website, just full of information. But the local perception of kangaroos as a pest comes as a stark contrast, let's face it, to this new multi-million-dollar tourism advertisement that is featuring Ruby the Roo, a CGI kangaroo to entice overseas visitors to the country. So Kangaroos Alive have been quick to point out the sick contrast, let's face it, of this commercial killing while still holding them up, on the other hand, as ambassadors. As Australian citizens and advocates for kangaroos, how does it make you feel when the government aims to further capitalise on the exploitation of kangaroos? Could the tourism industry actually be used to help kangaroos instead? Wouldn't that be a lot better?
Greg, do you want to go?
No, it's Kate's specialty with the tourism angle.
It is.
So we of course think that, yes. In Australia, let's start off with Australia used to be a whaling nation, and it flipped in the 70s and became a whale watching nation. It was quite recently, really, only a few decades ago, where we really changed our whole perception on how we saw whales as wildlife that we could enjoy. And that's something that we could really do, as you say. Why wouldn't the tourism industry turn our focus and, really see these as a beautiful, natural excitement that people all over the world can come and see that's unique to Australia? In fact, the Australian tourism industry is worth about $62 million annually. $62 billion annually. And kangaroos are one of the top 3 things everyone wants to see in Australia. So it's almost like the two hands aren't even talking to one another, with the industry coming in to wipe out the kangaroos while the tourism industry is holding them up. It's sort of a very bent perspective, and people should be horrified that we're trying to sell our country based on this cartoon character, while night after night animals are being slaughtered in the field. It's a horrendous hypocrisy.
I think we all need some good news, and I think the good news coming out of this latest attempt by Tourism Australia is the public response to it. So much so that Rose Byrne, the famous Australian actor who is the voice of this new campaign released only last week, has had to shut her social media down because the response has been so loud and overwhelming. So that is good news, because I know when we were in production on this film and when we released the film, there wasn't such a concerted effort to do anything about it, because people basically didn't know. So I think one of the proudest things for Kate and myself and Greg and Diane is that the film has had such an impact that people now know. And so that's really good news, because the film has been out for 3 years now. And I think that that's been one of the most pleasing things for me about this tourism thing. I know it sounds bizarre, but the reaction was so strong and so swift. You only have to go onto social media to see we now have literally an army of people sticking up for the kangaroo, which wasn't the case, because people clearly didn't know what was going on. And yeah, I think Tourism Australia will be severely embarrassed by this. I think that, the hypocrisy is now very much in the, public view. And we'll continue to lobby them to change the way they approach these things, and obviously continue to lobby the Australian governments to shut down this massacre.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. Must be very rewarding. And I remember going to Australia several times, and that's what us tourists do. We go to, the wildlife parks to see the kangaroos, to have those close encounters, to have the photos and the cuddles with the wallabies and all of that kind of stuff. So to be, like you say, it's a disgusting and sick contrast, really, that you're encouraging us as tourists to do that, but then they're hunting them down in the dead of night when nobody else can see. So it's fantastic that you actually get to see the result of your creative efforts as well, because so often when you put something out into the world, you don't necessarily see the how it's reciprocated in the community. So it's brilliant that everyone's rallied around. And for everyone joining us today, hopefully you can also join in with rallying and learning about the kangaroo, so we can stop things like this. So thank you everyone who's joining us today. It's brilliant to see. And I really do hope the tourism industry is getting a bit of a kicking about this. Peace, compassion, give them a kicking. It's all grand as long as it saves kangaroos. Definitely.
But it's great what you're doing there. So during our research for this panel, we bore witness to some of the many horrors that are enacted by the commercial kangaroo industry. As an outside observer, I couldn't help but find myself finding similarities between, for me, coming from the UK, England's fox hunting, but then also there's the Canadian seal clubbing. Both of these atrocities were brought to light, shocked the public, and now they're being stopped. But unfortunately, here with the kangaroos, we have a different problem in that it's shrouded by the night. Everything that happens in the dark. So it's heart-wrenching to see what's going on especially the treatments of joeys, baby kangaroos. While the abduction and the horrific treatment of baby cows in the dairy industry is being more well documented, we don't hear about the infanticide that's happening to other species, such as kangaroos. What is the reality of joeys caught in the crossfire of this industry? And more so, what is deemed the acceptable practice by governing bodies for the treatment of these tiny babies? Greg, could you fill us in on this possibly?
Yes, Gareth. Thank you. You wouldn't believe it until, or we didn't believe it until we actually saw it. But being in a situation where the industry came to us, sitting here in a very large conservation property for kangaroos, the industry moved in here around 2009, and we began to witness what happened to the kangaroos and the baby joeys, and it's the reasons why the level of cruelty that was involved was what drove us into trying to make a record of it and get it out to the public. It is atrocious. It's horror. It's brutal. It's a brutal industry, which has been so well hidden for so long. The joeys are probably the most concerning part of the whole thing, though. It's as I've seen the whole industry, is that the joeys that succumb to the actions in the fields every night. So a lot of the times they are killed as part of the code of practice, and they are allowed to be killed under government guidelines, whereby they can just be hit against a solid object, so swung against a solid object, the front of the car, a bull bar, or a rock, or taken to with a knife for cervical dislocation, or just have the head cut off. And research, as we put more pressure on government and industry to find more humane options, at least as a start, even the government's own investigations into the methods of euthanasia, the methods of killing in the field, show great concerns that for the joeys that don't die instantaneously from those methods of euthanasia. So that's a big concern. We find the bodies of those little joeys after shooting events. We try to save the ones that we can, and we find the bodies and see what's inflicted upon them. It brings tears to your eyes. The other side of it, and something we work with, is the orphan joeys. So very small joeys, they cannot survive without their mum, but they're left in the field. So the shooters will come along and maybe take most of the family group, but leave joeys there that will succumb to the elements, will succumb to prey animals like the big eagles that we have here, or foxes, or dingoes. So there's no hope for them. They are just collateral damage, and that's in the hundreds of thousands every year. They're not even given the worth of being counted as part of the process. They're not in the government reports of numbers killed. So the estimates are often between 400 and 800,000 joeys a year are just discarded, left to survive by themselves. They will survive for days. In the mornings, as the sun rises after shooting events here, we can hear the joeys in the paddocks. It can be in the fog. You can't locate them. They're out there. You know they're there. They're calling for their mum. They'll often find the body parts of their mum because of the smell. So there will be a butchering site where the mother's head and the other body parts will be. And we have found the joeys that have died in amongst the mother's, nuzzled up to the mother's head, severed head. So it is as macabre as that. There's no easy way. You can't polish it. It's just absolute horror for the joeys, never alone the adults that are misshot and often left in the field as well.
That's really horrendous. I mean, it's absolutely heart-wrenching. And I mean, these joeys, they're literally being taken from their mother's pouches as well. It's not like they're hopping along next to their mum. They're in their mother's pouch when they are taken away from their mother like this. It's absolutely horrendous. Greg, when we were watching the kangaroo film, from the start, it really feels like we're right there with you and Diane as you prepare for another chilling onslaught of wild kangaroos under the cover of darkness each night. I can't imagine what it must be like to have to witness this horror on your own back doorstep night after night as you deal with the fallout and have to tend to the injured. Having become experts at kangaroo rescues, what measures have you and Diane had to take to keep those animals that you do manage to heal and rehabilitate safe on your own property?
Well, it's quite a challenge and often a battle, but locally we've had since 2006, we've had to adapt the property to offer greater protections for the animals that we can both retain in this large area that backs onto many miles of forest, so we have a large area to protect. So locally we've worked with other landholders that choose to shoot kangaroos for profit. We've paid for fence improvements to stop kangaroos from the good side
It's so terrible to hear that, and such a struggle on your own property. And I know previously we spoke with Lex Rigby from Viva, and they did an investigation into pig farms. And one of the big things that really shocked the public was thumping, which is, as you described previously, is the blunt force trauma that they use on joeys and stuff. And with it, for the pig campaign, it was getting that seen by the public that stopped that certain pig farm from happening, despite it being a standard regulation killing. And so, just getting more eyes on what's happening here is so important. And I really hope for everybody who's watching this today that they'll be going away and, informing more people about it and watching the film. Mm-hmm. Once again, the link is in the top of the comments at the moment. So please do check that out after this live stream. But in what has been described as one of the greatest magic tricks of wildlife management, sustainable quota limits are created through aerial reporting and the addition of a number of mitigating and correcting factors. In one such case, 1,300 eastern grey kangaroos were counted, which was then extrapolated into 500,000 kangaroos. Where are they getting the number from? I don't know where, but it would appear sustainable quotas will always match the industry's interest. If they always need to be reducing the numbers, well, there's always profit to be had. So for our viewers at home who are unaware of the leaps and bounds that come with kangaroo math, would one of you care to share with us how we're actually seeing the populations represented on the ground, and what is the scale of the slaughter we are seeing from this industry?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, because unpacking the myth of too many is one of the biggest issues we face in trying to protect the kangaroos. Because as Kate has explained, generation after generation since colonial white settlement has been told this lie, that there are too many. And so straight up, we're battling with that there is this belief, and that belief is then propagated into the science being generated by government funding and industry funding. So we all know when governments and industry fund research, we know what comes out of that research. And these same scientists have built careers on this government-funded research. So it has become generational in academia as well, that these numbers are correct. So to counter that, you have to be a very brave scientist in Australia, because basically you are shouted down. And what we unpacked in the film was that the magic word is extrapolation. So you've already told us about this. They counted 1,300 in this one district in New South Wales, and they extrapolated and ended up with an estimate of 500,000 eastern greys from counting 1,300. So there's the magic. And we tried to, and I mean that in a very sarcastic way, because basically they are extrapolating to come up with the numbers that they need to support the narrative. We're talking Australia here. I mean, even doing this webinar, I still sit here and go, this is Australia we're talking about, a so-called progressive paradise. I'm still scratching my head how this is happening in Australia. And basically, as an Australian, I carry the shame of finding out the truth, because really my whole life I've been sold a lie. And so on all levels, but going back to your question, so what again, trying to find some positives out of this was that the New South Wales held a parliamentary inquiry last year, and the testimony that was presented to that inquiry is now on the public record, and that testimony finally is starting to unpack the myth that there are too many. We now know that there are landscapes across Australia that have no kangaroos. So we now know, thanks to this testimony, that there is local and regional extinction happening of kangaroos. So finally, the myth is being challenged. Finally, it is being busted. And I'll just give you another example, like the one that we mentioned in the film with the 1,300 turning into 500,000. There's a zone in New South Wales in Tibooburra, which is the top northwest corner of the state, that in 2016, their population estimate was over 400,000. The latest estimate, which came in 2020, it was 7,000. So that's government's own counting. So it's gone from 400,000 to 7,000. So that zone is the size of Croatia. So there's there's vast landscapes that are losing kangaroos. So basically, we need to have this discussion with brave scientists that are willing to look at this data in a new way and really have a robust discussion, not listen to the lies that are coming out of government. And we're hopeful we can do that, because this is going to take, some robust discussions with all the stakeholders, because this is a question that we've been asking ever since we started production on this film. What do we want? Do we want kangaroos on the landscape? And if the answer is yes, then we really, really need to address what's going on.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, like some of the stories that we've heard from people we know going over to Australia. They've had to go to a zoo to see a live kangaroo. The only place they've seen them is dead on the side of the road. Otherwise, they just don't see them, and so it's crazy.
And yet they're taking over the country,
Plague-like proportions, folks. You heard it here. It's bizarre that they can carry on with this lie.
It is a lie, like Mick says. Australians have been lied to. We've been lied to as well. I think everyone is being lied to, and this is why your work and your film is so important. But while our talk so far has had a strong focus on Australia, it's important to note this issue is not only national, but it is international. Each and every one of us watching here today has the ability to affect kangaroos' lives, either for better or for worse. According to the Australian Department of Agriculture and Water Resources, around 4,000 tonnes of kangaroo meat is exported annually to more than 60 countries as part of their meat and leather industry, netting about $200 million. And this is not farmed kangaroo. They are being shot on properties like Greg's in under cover of darkness. And Kangaroos Alive have been campaigning tirelessly, all over the place, but particularly in Europe lately, to ban the imports of kangaroo meat and leather into the region. Could you share with us why it's such a crucial area for us to target, and what a win here could mean for kangaroos back home in Australia?
Yeah, no, that's true. And, I guess you hear about them being killed. What are they being killed for? Well, one of the biggest pressures on any wildlife is commercial exploitation. I mean, once you want to set up a weekly, pressured industry where you have to ship certain amounts of meat to 60 countries across the world in leather, that's an ongoing pressure that has to go through fires, it has to go through floods, it has to go through droughts. You sort of set up this really unrealistic pressure on wildlife, and across the world, that's always been a huge issue. The whaling industry is just a classic example that somehow we've all managed to most of the world has managed to see now how that didn't work. So the commercial pressure on kangaroos is really the biggest issue for the kangaroo populations of Australia. I mean, it's not just a very few people making money. It's not anything we need, and no one needs to eat this product. So it's used for human consumption, for pet food, and for leather goods. So like Adidas and Nike use it for their top soccer boot. There's lots of, there'll be, wherever you live, there'll be kangaroo probably in your pet food. And definitely, human consumption of kangaroo, you can buy it in supermarkets around the world as a sort of game meat. It's really just a bush meat, a wild bush meat. So to stop the pressure on Kangaroos Alive have worked very hard at this pressure point of the commercial industry.
Yeah, we were invited to screen the film in the EU Parliament because the EU is the largest importer of kangaroo meat and skins. And like most people, we were shocked to hear that, and I'm sure your people watching this will be shocked by that. So the EU, we were invited to screen at the EU Parliament when the film was released, and the response was pretty immediate. There was a lot of shock and anger. A lot of the members of the European Parliament had no idea. They had no idea what was going on with the baby joeys. They had no idea how much of a market the European Union was. So Kangaroos Alive have been running a campaign ever since to make sure that this import is banned in the EU. And so we're working with a number of groups in Europe and some sympathetic members of the European Parliament or MEPs to campaign to shut the trade down into Europe, because it's a no-brainer. Most Europeans go, why do we need kangaroo? Like, there's no need for these products anywhere, let alone Europe. And not only that, that's ongoing, and there's stuff where we're actually traveling to Europe next week to be part of that campaign as part of World Kangaroo Day. But also there's been immediate impact too. There's some big European brands that once they found out about the cruelty, they pulled out of using kangaroo skins. And we're talking about brands like Versace and Gucci and Prada, and some big name supermarkets across Europe that have stopped selling it. So, there is some common sense. And now as Australians, we realise that most of the pressure is going to come or is coming from outside of Australia. And we're happy to support that because whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It very much seems the way that it's needed to be done. Like, I know here in New Zealand, we have a lot of issues which are set up from the colonization of it, and they're so ingrained in the culture that when we try and fight it here locally, we just hit those brick walls. Like we had the milk documentary come out recently, and New Zealand media just shut it down straight away. They weren't having a bar of it.
Yeah.
But they won awards all around the world and stuff, much like you folks with your films too. But that was the thing. It's taken that outside pressure to come into here in order to actually get any sort of shift happening. And so I see Veganics in the comments there from YouTube saying about how, saying most Aussies don't seem to know about these issues. And so, it's up to all of us, whether we are in Australia, New Zealand, wherever you are around the world, viewers today, to be involved in getting that message out there. And I love what you're doing right now in Europe. I remember as a kid growing up in Wales, we had, I think it was the White Stag pub down the road, and they started bringing in kangaroo and crocodile meat. And so it was the whole thing of the village. Oh, let's go and have
exotic.
Yes, really exotic. Oh, I heard it tastes like chicken. That whole.
We were told kangaroo was much healthier for us as well in New Zealand when it first appeared.
Yeah, and the thing was, it's just a gimmick thing, And so, is it worth the slaughtering, bringing this species almost to extinction for the fact that your pub's got a local gimmick? It's not, is it? So for your current actions in Europe, you mentioned that World Kangaroo Day, and we mentioned that at the start. What sort of things can people expect coming up in this next week?
October 24th.
Yes.
World Kangaroo Day.
Add a link in the comments now. But what sort of things have you got coming up next week? Or is there anything you can share with us right now about that?
Yeah, look, this is the 3rd year of World Kangaroo Day. Kangaroos Alive initiated this international celebration 3 years ago, and it's just grown exponentially, really, which is perfect. It's really grassroots, and there's so many things happening everywhere across Australia. There's protests and movie screenings and there's a huge photo so one of the most prolific things is there's a photo competition. This year there was over 3,000 photos entered. 600 photos entered, and 3,000. Oh no, it's gone up to 5,000 people voting for it now. I mean, it's just massive, and the photos are just fantastic. There's kangaroo walks and talks. To go back to the tourism, one of the things we feel is really important is if communities really love their kangaroos and are proud of them and want to look after them, they'll start, from a council level, start creating really great walks and talks.
Kangaroo watching,
like whale watching in communities. So that's starting on World Kangaroo Day. Yesterday, we had a message stick delivered from the Yuin community here in New South Wales, who delivered a message stick to 2 senators at the Parliament House for the kangaroos. The Yuin community and the Indigenous community is linked across, of course, 60,000 years, but still now as a sacred totem. And this is a much needed conversation as well in the Australian government and the industry, that we're basically killing part of their culture every night without any concerns or consultation of how that affects them. So, worldkangarooday.org has a lot of events going on, some of which you can just jump in and do.
The events page is pretty cool.
The events page has a lot on.
There's a lot going on, yeah.
Another thing that's really great is there's a protest happening in London, and there is things happening in America. And the other thing that we're doing in Australia is the Kangaroo Road Rescue Mission, where
Maybe Greg can comment on that.
Oh, yeah, because Greg's at the heart of Kangaroo Road Rescue. So, Greg, do you want to talk a bit more about that? Because that's another part of kangaroos' lives that are being affected by humans.
Yeah, there's a fantastic, ever-increasing community ownership of the kangaroo issue in Australia. So many people have been fighting for so long, but World Kangaroo Day being in its 3rd year really does just empower people to get out there, and because you have to be often courageous to fight for kangaroos in Australia, depending on where you live. So it's a fantastic tool and encouragement for people to grab that ownership. And this year, it's very exciting. It's nourishing for people because there's so many people out there that want to do more and can't, and feel the frustration and the pain of the suffering of the kangaroos. So, from a wildlife carer's point of view, it fills your heart and gives you permission to get out there and support you. So I can say nothing more than people to get to have a look at the World Kangaroo Day page and contribute and involve yourself and show that love and support for kangaroos. So it's so important.
Yeah, well, I'll just bring it up here, actually. Excuse all my stuff at the top. But yeah, there is so much going on this page. And so for everybody, you can get involved. And look here for activists. Oh, sorry, my mouse. Add your World Kangaroo Day event here. So for future events, even I don't know if it's too late now. Well, we've got a few days left to go. But if you want to get involved and be doing something, get stuck in, folks. This is what we're all about here with Vegan FTA, is getting people active. But there is so much happening. There we are there, Vegan FTA with Killing a National Treasure. But yes, so many walks and talks, the Q&A screenings. I'm very keen on a lot of those. But yeah, there's so much going on. And so I really look forward to seeing what everyone comes up with for the day. If you're not already, make sure you're following them on your socials as well.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a fun education process there too. Just scroll back down, Gareth. There's a back up. Sorry, back up. Yeah, there's an activity book there that we're creating. Oh, too far.
That one.
That one.
So there's an activity book that we're creating that we're asking people to submit a page of fun things to do with a kangaroo. We've got a crossword, and we've got to join the dots, and we've got a colouring, and like, again, as Greg said, just giving people permission to, encourage people to talk positively about the kangaroo. I mean, it really is baby steps for our nation. It's bizarre. As I said, I still scratch my head that we're even having this conversation, but we are. And the reality is that it's baby steps, and that so many of us want to change the language. We want to change the narrative of how kangaroos are talked about, how they're treated in our country, and slowly but surely we will get there. And all these things, everyone that's contributing, it's all making a difference. So there's lots of things that people can actually do on that page, regardless of whether you live in Australia or not. So, we'd love them to, to jump on and help out.
I think one thing we haven't just mentioned is that you can choose not to buy kangaroo products. You don't have to feed your pets wildlife. That is not a good idea. That does not help the wildlife. There's no farming of kangaroos in Australia. There's no endless resource. This is a finite resource of a wild animal that is just a weird idea that you would feed it to your pets. But, as in most industries, there's a lot of support with government funds and support, right
Subsidies
across the government for the growth of industry. And, we're really fighting their publicity machine to let people know about this. It is not a clean green meat at all. It is not necessarily that you need to buy the leather. There's so many alternatives for leather now. We don't need to
we don't need animal skins.
We don't need animal skins to wear them, or have them in our handbags or shoes or whatever. So ask, because the other thing that's sneaky about kangaroo products is it's sneaked into, like, in some of the soccer boots, it's called K-leather. So you've got to really ask around and make sure, if you've got a very soft, like, durable looking leather, check out what that is too. A, don't buy leather at all, but B, ask what it is, because people should know. And same with dog food, and same with eating, food from the supermarket. You do not need to be eating that. So tell your friends. And even though they'll say, I've heard again and again, like, this company tells us, this pet food company tells us that theirs is sustainable, as if there's some secret little sustainable corner in the industry that their company is party to. They're very lucky,
So everyone around the world can play a part in that, as Kate says, because they very systematically entered kangaroo product into the market around the world. So everyone can play a part in it, have the conversation with their friends and colleagues, and make sure they identify where it is being sold and say no. And we can all shut this industry down together.
Because I remember, I think it was a previous conversation we've had with you, Kate, not on screen, but when you were telling us, first enlightening us to the pet food industry with kangaroo. And, it's not a case of, yes, we can, I don't know about other countries, but over here we can go and buy kangaroo meat, pet food for our companion animals. But it's not like that, is it? We're talking major, huge companies that everybody knows that manufacture pet food. There is a very, very high chance that their pets are eating kangaroo in some form. Is that right?
Yeah.
Kangaroos are sold out of Australia, sometimes as other, without even knowing.
It is the big brands.
Yeah, but we know so little really
brands, yes,
about how much is going out of the country with dog food and pet food. There's so many industries that are sort of underregulated and unseen. And, again, people are told this sort of lie and propaganda that it's better for you, or it's better for your pets, or it's farmed humanely.
But to answer your question, yes, it is the big pet food brands. Yes.
It's the one everybody knows. Everybody knows these companies.
Well, I don't think there's a problem they're saying. Is Nestle and Purina, aren't they two of the
Nestle Mars, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that they are companies that people can obviously have an impact on by saying no, we don't want to eat Australia's wildlife, or we don't want to feed Australia's wildlife to our pets.
Interesting being in Europe and things, when you see just endless use of land with very little wild spaces left, and definitely very few wildlife. So in Australia, we live in this amazingly beautiful part of the world where we, like, looking at Greg's background now, it's just amazing that we can live in these big, large spaces with the wildlife. We can coexist with that wildlife, and it is a luxury at this time to be able to do that. And we should be treasuring it as a sort of the last bastion of beauty and abundance with wildlife. It's a real, Greg and Diane, we speak to them up at the land, up at their property, and they're just sitting in amongst the kangaroos there, and, the luckiest people on earth, really.
Oh, I'm so glad that the kangaroos and the joeys have got a safe haven with Greg and Diane. And honestly, people, you need to see this movie. You really do. It's up there with, every vegan documentary that you can think of that, everyone says, watch Seaspiracy, watch Cowspiracy. You got to watch Kangaroo, a love-hate story. You will not believe it. Your mind will be absolutely blown. It's cinematically beautiful. It is harrowing. I'm not going to lie. It is a harrowing watch. You will be affected by it, I think. But I don't think anyone can not be, but it is so, so important. And I'm so glad that you guys have taken up the fight for kangaroos, because what would they do without you, quite honestly, Yeah. And thank you for taking this message all around the world the way you're doing.
It's been so fantastic being able to bring this to light here today. And once again, link to the film is in the description, comments, wherever they are on your side of the screen. It should be there now, so you can watch that later. Please do. It is a brilliant one. But a key goal for us here at Vegan FTA is giving our audience members, our activists, our movement, the ability to challenge the exploitation of animals globally and get involved in these campaigns. And so today's panel is a call to action to stand against the world's largest commercial exploitation of a country's terrestrial native wildlife. What is going on in Australia is brutal, as we've heard today. Is there any other ways, from what we've already just talked about with World Kangaroo Day, that our viewers can get involved in supporting your campaigns at Kangaroos Alive and be active for this Kangaroo Day? Have they got any petitions or anything you would like us to go and follow? Is the European one finished now?
Well, no, the European one's still sort of in process. We don't actually have a direct European petition because we've been too busy on the ground campaigning. But I would imagine that we could also direct them to the Animal Justice Party website, Greg, where there is an active petition. Is that correct?
Yes. The Animal Justice Party .com .org would be a great place to have a look around. Also, their blogs there have got a lot of information as well on kangaroos and how to help. So that would be a good direction, Gareth.
Brilliant.
And Mark Pearson, the senator from the Animal Justice Party, is featured in our film. And
love Mark. He's great.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have Mark in the Parliament, and he has been able. He's a key part in this campaign because he was the one that set up the New South Wales parliamentary inquiry, and the evidence that Greg and Diane have been gathering over the last decade of the cruelty. They were key eyewitnesses to this parliamentary inquiry. So, and that testimony that Greg and Diane, do you want to just comment on where that's at with that? You guys are publishing a paper, Greg. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Yes. So, having witnessed what we saw, and then trying to get better outcomes for the kangaroos that were being killed, and having such a resilience, such a pushback from government, we ended up, just by necessity, and as citizens of the universe, actually starting to collect evidence, and that involved going into paddocks after shooters had been through and collecting the body parts, particularly the heads of kangaroos that have been severed in the field. And over a period of 9 years, we collected a large sample of kangaroos' severed heads that are left as part of the process to see how the adults died as well as the joeys. But this was a focus on whether they had been killed instantaneously with a bullet, as the industry claims it does 99.9% of the time. And over that 9 year period, we were able to almost extrapolate like the government does. We didn't have to tell lies, though. Over the large sample, found that between 38 and 42% of those kangaroos didn't die instantaneously, that they died a prolonged death. They weren't prolonged death. They weren't killed by instantaneously by a bullet. The brain case was not fractured or injured at all. So they were probably, or most likely, remained conscious while they were laying on the ground after taking a bullet somewhere in the body, until the shooters shoot some more kangaroos and then come back to them to deliver a blow with an iron bar or some other solid object, or to stab them in the throat for them to bleed out. So witnessing that drove us to the point where we had to collect that evidence, and that's in a research paper that hopefully we'll have out very soon. And that'll be, the government wouldn't want to see that, the results of that research, because it will be quite damning to the industry. And I don't know how they're going to cover this one up. They're clever at marketing, but this will be something that will impact the industry heavily.
Good thing too. And these are the animals that are going into the pet foods that the big companies are selling, and that are going into the shoes that people are wearing without realizing.
So,
and this is the animal that they're using for the tourism campaign. So the hypocrisy is there for everyone to see now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that this is getting out there. It's so important.
Well,
it's an industry, but it's an industry based just on terror and horror. There's no doubt about it. Having witnessed it we've witnessed hundreds of shooting events, and what happens to the kangaroos and the way they're pursued for hours, and then shooters will come back the following night after taking out half of the family group. So mum and the uncle, if you want. These are just functioning, beautiful, gentle beings in family groups, just trying to exist in sometimes very harsh areas like this. And the shooters will come in and take out some family groups, and they leave the parts of those family groups. And the next morning, as the sun comes up, you can see the remaining family. They're distraught, and they've got no idea what's happened. The rest of the family's lying there gutted, laying in the paddocks, and I just don't know how their hearts just don't break. And I know that's what happens to the joeys. We often find joeys in butchering sites laying next to their mum, the smell of their mum in the body parts. And I'm sure you can't find a physical ailment or a physical injury why they've died. Often Diane and I have looked at them, and it's like they laid there and died of a broken heart. And that's an industry that should not exist in a civil society. And it's a shame on the Australian government to do that. So that's what gives you fills you that what we saw, and telling that story hopefully fills their tank to say no. And we're right it's got a great momentum at the moment, so we've got to take advantage of that. And people from around the world are going to save the kangaroo. They're going to help us save the kangaroo, I'm sure. It's just their day is coming. They certainly deserve it after 50 or 60 years of commercial industry in Australia.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for bringing it to light. And to be honest, I mean, you've only got to see the documentary, but hearing you talk now as well, I don't know where you and Diane get your strength from, seeing this time and time again, like hundreds of times. Is it something like 600 shooting events? I think I read somewhere that you've witnessed.
Locally, half of that, but we had to travel around a little bit to make sure that it was not just an area specific. So, but yes, it's many hundreds. It is relentless in the Australian bush. It's about profit. So these guys just come out night after night. And when they talk about the populations declining, we're not a scientist. With this, from a layperson point of view, what we saw was within the first 12 months of the industry starting here, we in 6 square kilometres, we didn't have any large males. So they came in and took all the big fellas, because that's the maximum profit. They might make $30 or $40 once they cut them up and hang them on a rusty hook on the back of their truck. But then they came for the females, the large mums, and then they just worked their way through. So within 2 years, the impact was huge over the 6 square kilometres that we were monitoring. It was just a lot of juveniles, a lot of young kangaroos. They no longer had any integrity, family group structure. Now we're seeing, the genetic integrity after so long, and we've got 13 years of it here recording. You do see, as generations come through, the kangaroos get smaller because the big kangaroos are no longer there, and the genetic pool is lessened. So that's the urgency. It's just gone on for too long, and it needs to stop straight away.
Thank you so much for doing all your research and taking all that evidence in. Yeah, it's fantastic what you're doing. I really look forward to seeing that paper coming out, and here at Vegan FTA, we'll be sure to be sharing it and trying to get out in front of our audience as much as possible. And as we look to start to wrap up this this panel now, I'd just like to say to all our audience members, to take a moment to think about, in your home country, say the UK, if they started producing cold cut corgis, you know, if you're in America, they started doing bald eagle wings. How would you feel about those animals being targeted? How would you feel about their suffering? I think if any of us would fight for those animals, we need to be fighting for all the animals, and kangaroos especially. We have the evidence here. We have the resources now, thanks to Kangaroos Alive, thanks to our brilliant speakers, that we can be advocating to try and save this national icon. It may not be our home nation's icon, but they deserve that treatment. They deserve our action. So please, for everyone today, I want to thank you for joining us, but also please get involved. World Kangaroo Day, once again, go through the comments. There are links to go find the events page. You can also go to Kangaroos Alive and also watch the film. It is fantastic.
Very important film. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any other closing statements you'd like to add before we wrap this up? We can
talk to you all day. We're scratching the surface. You've got to go to the website and watch the film, and you'll learn heaps more as well. Like, we've got to be saving these kangaroos.
Yeah.
Look, I do want to do a fundraising pitch. One of the main reasons we set up Kangaroos Alive was to help Greg and Diane with the ongoing costs of their sanctuary. It's extraordinary how selfless they are. They are the true heroes of this movement, and we're very proud to be working with them, and very proud to have created this NGO Kangaroos Alive, but it costs money. So please, if you want, that's the least you could do is jump on board and become a supporter of Kangaroos Alive, and know that the money goes straight to the people on the ground.
Absolutely. It's so well deserved. I mean, yeah, where would so many of these kangas and the joeys be without Greg and Diane to nurse them back to health and help them enjoy a safe life.
And I just wanted to thank you guys for seeing that it was something that needed to be looked at, and we really do need international support. I mean, we have amazing crews on the ground now across Australia, calling it out, shouting in their communities, talking to their councils, talking to their politicians. So that's been fantastic, and it feels like, there's been people doing it for years, and now that's growing and growing, and I feel like voices are being heard. But it's really important that, organizations that have this international reach like you guys can tell your community, because we need your help.
And there are more and more direct actions happening outside of embassies as well. I know we've already mentioned that we're going to be at the European Parliament on Monday for a debate, which we're very excited about, that the issue is being discussed in the European Parliament on Monday. I know that Jenny Elliott's doing something in London at the Australian embassy there. I know that there are a number of politicians that are being lobbied on Monday in Australia. So there are some direct action things that you could do in your own community as well in regards to what the connection with Australia, whether it be a tourist office or an embassy or whatever. But clearly, the more we do, exposing Australia's shame, the better.
And when the tourism ad comes to your country, which it will, for the new kangaroo tourism ad, comment in the social media section, because it's really important. Just keep commenting. Never believe the lies. It's all lies. The propaganda will be lies. People will get back to you saying, oh, no, it's all good. Just keep going and fight for that. And I want you to come to Australia and see the kangaroos in the wild. It is really just one of life's great experiences, and they're the most beautiful creatures. So in the film, you can see them just running in the wild. It was part of the beauty of making the film, was actually to spend time with them. And, don't be fooled and don't miss out. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to experience them live.
Well, I don't think the kangaroos could have any better advocates and, people fighting for them than you guys. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing and have been doing all these years for them. Yeah. I'm just glad the word is getting out. We'll help you keep getting it out as much as possible around the world. And hopefully we can make things better for kangaroos. Stop the insanity.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you all so much for joining us. I've once again added another link into the comment section so you can go and see the Kangaroos Alive donate page. So please do get involved, and yes, get out there, get hopping mad about this issue, folks. I couldn't get away with that.
It wouldn't be a chat with you without some kind of pun with it.
But thank you all so much for joining us. I've loved this discussion. It's it's harrowing, but it's really it puts that fire in your belly that we need to act for kangaroos. And so yeah, thank you everyone who has been commenting and joined us through the chat here today. Please follow the links. As I've said probably 1,000 times now, it's been a wonderful panel. So yeah, thank you, Mick and Kate, and thank you so much, Greg.
Cheers, thanks
Thanks guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Happy World Kangaroo Day. I hope you have a great day on Monday.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
October 24th, World Kangaroo Day. Get to it, folks.